Good morning, everybody. Everything new under the sun. I want to take a look at three things which point to the what I believe is the soon rebuilding of the third temple. Now, it's not something that Christians look forward to necessarily. We know that the third temple is not needed. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and the Jews do not recognize and did not recognize the Messiah when he came first 2,000 years ago. And so they still want to set up the temple to worship him, and they don't need to. But because they have not recognized the Messiah yet, they are still looking for the rebuilding of the third temple and still looking for sacrifices to cover their sins. And so prophetically, we have an indication from Daniel 9:27 and from other passages that suggests that the Antichrist suggests that a third temple will be rebuilt because the Antichrist comes and he stops the sacrifices and he causes the abomination of desolation. He sits on the throne in the temple. And so there's been two temples so far, and there'll be a third temple according to scriptures. When you look at the scriptures and read between the lines effectively, the ceasing of the sacrifices and the fact that the Antichrist sits on the throne in the temple at the time of the abomination of desolation, at the time of the 7-year tribulation, etc. Three things, three articles which speak to the rebuilding of the third temple. This is the first one from BreakingIsraelNews.com, the temple mitzvah that may fix the global economy. So this is an interesting one, and it comes from a commandment in Exodus: the rich shall not pay more and the poor shall not pay less than half a shekel when giving Hashem's offering as an expiation for your persons. Exodus 30:15. And so there's a project on, and it's been going for the last 22 years, to collect silver coins for the exclusive use of the third temple. But according to biblical commandment, this annual gift is incumbent upon every Jewish male, so it's something that every Jewish male will have to comply with. The potential market for these coins is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So there could be a lot of coin making here to provide coins for the offering to the third temple. It goes on here. Prager has minted uniquely designed silver half shekel for Jews to perform the biblically mandated commandment in its proper season. Before reestablishing the biblical commandment, Prager thoroughly researched the subject and also acquired weights, archaeological artifacts from the temple area. It says here, the Bible commands every Jewish male above the age of 20 to bring a half shekel weight of silver, a little over 7 grams, to the temple. And there you can see Exodus 30 spoken of there. It says, regardless of the status of wealth, the same amount was given by each man, since it is forgiven by Torah law to actually count Jews. Counting the coins took place of a national census. The half shekels that were collected were used as a form of tax to support the Jewish temple. So you have this person who's trying to bring back these silver half shekels, which are an offering to be used in the third temple. So you see all these events coming together, the red heifer, other events, the Temple Institute creating the menorah and the wash basin and all these things, effectively in preparation for the third temple to be rebuilt. And you need all these things for a rebuilt third temple. And most prophecy scholars believe that part of the peace agreement and the 7-year tribulation is going to be the ability for the Jews to go ahead and rebuild the third temple. The other thing you need is kind of a grassroots rising in the Israeli public sphere for the rebuilding of the temple. You need the Jews wanting a third temple in order for it to be a good carrot on a stick to push forth and make it happen with the peace plan, to make it something interesting for Israel to accept, and not just interesting, but maybe the key item in the peace plan, which would convince Israelis to vote and to agree to a peace plan. So, in that vein, we're going to take a look at the movement of the Jewish public and activists for a third temple. First, let's look at this. This is another item required by the third temple because they need red heifer ashes to cleanse and to sanctify the holy implements. Two new red heifer candidates. So there's two new red heifer candidates. This is March 6, 2019. And it says, after years of hard work and preparation, and this is a story we've been following for a long time. Of course, it's very interesting because the Temple Institute has all the other implements. All they need are the ashes to purify the implements, etc. It says, after years of hard work and preparation, the rabbi charged with overseeing the red heifer claims that the biblical commandment is on the verge of reappearing. Rabbi Azariah Ariel goes on record explaining how the return of this ritual purification will and will not change our lives. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has been working for 3 decades to educate the public and make practical steps to prepare for the third temple. So you have this institute, this organization that is educating the public, getting them ready, getting them geared up, getting the knowledge out there, the public information out there, getting the awareness up there, and making also practical steps by creating the garments for the priestly class, the Levites, making the tools that they're going to use, the sacrificial, the cups and the wash basins and the golden menorah and the table of showbread, etc. They're putting all these requirements together so that when the temple is rebuilt, they can move all these implements out of their museum, if you will, and just put them right in place, and they can start using them. They're also training the priesthood as well for the third temple sacrifices. So they've got people trained, ready to go as soon as the third temple is rebuilt. It says, after many years of research and work, those are close to bringing about an essential element, the red heifer. If they are successful, implementing the red heifer ritual will not only have implications for the temple service, but will also help Jews observe other commandments in a more complete manner. So it goes on here and talking about the physical requirements for a red heifer are simple yet precise. This has led to an intense search for an exceedingly rare candidate. And so the candidate can't have any blemishes, can't have any white hairs on it, etc. And here's a note about that. The rabbi described a recent case in which a calf was found to have 6 white hairs near its nose, which rendered it unfit. So the smallest blemish, according to the Jewish law, can render it unfit. And so if there is going to be a third temple, or if there are going to be sacrifices that the Antichrist then causes to be ceases, then they must have got around to the point of having a red heifer that was pure enough for them to go ahead and sacrifice it. It goes on, it says, the animal must be 2 years old. There can be no blemish, no holes in the ear. Until that point, it is considered a calf and not a cow. At that point, the cow can be slaughtered and prepared. It says, though reinstating the temple service in its entirety is dependent upon the return of the red heifer ritual, the ashes of the red heifer are prepared outside the temple. So the red heifer ritual is a requirement, a precondition to the temple, but the actual the ashes of it are prepared outside of the temple. So this can actually happen prior to the actual rebuilding. It says this is not a sacrifice per se, so it is burned in an area outside of the temple on the Mount of Olives. So this can happen basically at any time right now. And when it happens, then they will be all things will be in order to rebuild the third temple. It says the ashes are collected. A tiny bit of ashes are mixed with spring water and can be sprinkled on people in order to purify them. Again, they need the red heifer ashes to purify the people and the implements for the actual sacrifice in which would happen in the third temple. If properly prepared, 1 heifer is sufficient to purify the entire nation. There is no limit on how much wood can be burned with the heifer. Those ashes are also used to purify people. The tiny amount of ash, a few milligrams, can be mixed with a large quantity of water. In this manner, 1 heifer can purify the entire nation. It says even after the destruction of the Second Temple, ashes remained hidden away in different places and were used to purify Jews. So one heifer goes a long way. You don't need several red heifers, etc. It says the lack of ashes from red heifer has prevented us from performing many Torah commandments. The ashes of the red heifer are not necessarily exclusively for temple-related commandments. This will enable the complete performance of many mitzvot we already do today. So the interest there is that it's not just for the third temple. So regardless of whether the third temple is built, this will help them fulfill other commandments, Jewish commandments, in the Torah, etc. Many people that search for the red heifer are motivated by desire to hasten the arrival of the Messiah, but Rabbi Ariel stated emphatically that this is not the case. It says, this is a great misconception concerning the red heifer. Some people think that reinstating the ritual of the red heifer will bring the Messiah or reinstate the temple service. This is an incorrect understanding. He basically says that it's not his bidding. Excuse me, it's not his bidding, but the Lord, God, will do his bidding, and the Jews were given the Torah and the commandment to do the mitzvah. It's not our intention to bring about a divine reaction of the red heifer. Our interest is only to perform the mitzvah as we were given. The red heifer is a commandment, so we perform it. It will allow us to perform the mitzvah. Other than that, there are no expectations or additional agenda. So he is saying that. He is qualifying what they're doing. But obviously, it's interesting to note that really, if sacrifices are going to be reinstated and then ceased in the second half and the middle of the 7-year tribulation, then this red heifer is also needed then for the purification of the third temple implements and priests, etc. So basically, he is qualifying that. He's saying, you know what, we don't really. This doesn't really mean that the third temple is coming necessarily. It's going to be based on God's will for that, is what he's saying. But the end result is that when this red heifer is burnt, and the ashes are there for purification, then they are ready to go, and the third temple cannot happen before the ashes of the red heifer are ready. So that's a significant piece. All right, so going on to the last item, are the Jewish people interested in a third temple? Is the Temple Institute doing its job and getting people excited, getting the increase in the awareness of the third temple? And so what we now have happening in Israel is indeed activists and a general awareness of the public that a third temple is what they want. And there's some things transpiring on the Temple Mount, which really are convincing Jews that kind of now is the time, now or never. This is jpost.com, and the title is, A Synagogue on Temple Mount, Activists Say Let the Jews Move In. So we had the recent article about the Muslims creating, I think it was a fifth mosque on the Temple Mount. They just keep creating new places of worship, places to pray. And of course, Netanyahu shut that down. The Israeli police, the Temple Mount police went in, shut that down because the Muslims are basically changing the status quo by making new mosques. Every couple of years they make a new mosque, and there's something like 4 or 5 now. And so the Jews are seeing this and saying, you know what, if the Muslims are creating all these mosques, you know what, we need to go and establish our existence on the Temple Mount so that the Muslims do not continue to make more mosques. We need to claim part of it, and we need to set up a place of worship, a synagogue. It says Jews believe the site, venerated as holy in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam alike, is where the Beit HaMikdash used to sit. A group of Israeli activists are calling on the government to establish a synagogue on the Temple Mount. According to Asaph Fried, spokesman for an association of organizations dedicated to Jewish rights on the Temple Mount, more than 50 leaders across the religious spectrum gathered on Sunday to discuss the situation on the Temple Mount. So you can see that, boy, voices are getting louder. They are establishing committees. They're coming together to talk about the establishment of a synagogue and effectively what will become, I believe, the third temple on the Temple Mount. This is increasing public awareness. This is increasing public drive and a response to the rebuilding. And I believe that part of the peace plan is likely going to be, look, Jews, you can rebuild your third temple. We'll have peace and harmony. We'll take down all the walls and borders. and the carrot on the stick is that you can have your third temple. And I think they will jump at that. Remember, all the preconditions, all the things that have to be in place to actually use the third temple are in place. The training of the priests, the priestly garments, the priestly implements that will be required for sacrifices in the third temple. And now we have the red heifer, which is, they think, 2 candidates that are, at this point, without blemish. And they need that ash. So that means that red heifer pretty much has to be confirmed as blemish-free, I would say, this year, 2019. So that they can get sacrifice and burn the red heifer and get that ash for the purification, and then it's effectively ready to go at that point anytime in the for the rebuilding of the third temple. So the timeline is short. We have many events converging. We have, the Battle of Gog-Magog, which is shaping up. We have the removal of the U.S. from Syria, which is a significant event, basically allowing Ezekiel 38 and 39 to build up to a boiling point. It goes on here. In response, let's see. Riots have continuously erupted on the Temple Mount since last month when thousands of Palestinians stormed the Golden Gate, which had been previously closed by a court order since 2003. Jerusalem police arrested 2 senior Waqf officials. Those are the Jordanian set officials who are supposed to be managing the Temple Mount. So Jerusalem police arrested 2 senior officials who were supposed to be managing this, banning them from entering the Aqsa Mosque compound for 40 days. In response, it says Muslims took over and converted a 1,500-year-old structure located near the Golden Gate into a mosque. So in protest, they're creating more mosques, more places of prayer, changing the status quo. Meanwhile, the Jews can't even pray on the Temple Mount, while the Muslims create more and more places of worship, etc. The activists argue that opening the Golden Gate and establishing a new mosque, that the Muslims have broken the status quo agreements. Exactly what I've been saying. Israel has made attempts to shutter the gate, but Muslims have refused, threatening increased violence. If the status quo is broken away, then Israel needs to break it. Then Israel needs to break it too. So if the Muslims are changing the status quo on the Temple Mount, then Israel needs to do it as well and establish a place of prayer for the Jews on the Temple Mount. Jews should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. We need a place to pray, and we want a structure near the Golden Gate. So they're effectively asking for a synagogue, a place of worship, and this is going to lead to basically the rebuilding of the third temple. Why? Well, they have the ashes of the red heifer almost ready to go. That's going to be in place. We're getting close to the 7-year tribulation. We're getting close to the peace deal, which is going to be revealed after the April elections in Israel. And you have Jews, an increasing awareness, increasing push by activists to allow prayer on the Temple Mount. And that prayer is going to cause riots, so you need a peace plan real quick. You need an agreement. You need some enforcement to ensure that the Muslims and the Jews don't just start effectively World War III on the Temple Mount. And that's what could occur unless a peace plan comes into place where Arab leaders agree to the establishment of a holy place for the Jews on the Temple Mount. You're not just going to have an arbitrary agreement by the Israeli government for Jews to pray on the Temple Mount without significant violence by Muslims on the Temple Mount. They will be complaining that the status quo is not being held up. Meanwhile, they're creating other places of worship themselves on the Temple Mount. Establishing a synagogue is not unprecedented, explains Yaakov Heyman, head of Yeshe organization, he said in temple times there were always a synagogue near the temple. So again, a precondition to build up a step towards the rebuilding of the third temple. Once you have a synagogue there and Jews praying, how much more will they start being interested in the rebuilding of the third temple and starting sacrifices again? It's fascinating stuff, to be honest. His organization has mapped the Temple Mount and has created renderings for where up to 4 synagogues could be located on the holy site. Now they're being careful. They don't want to locate a synagogue on the Holy of Holies, on the place where the third temple is. So they're very particular about that. Martzel told the J-Post that the Temple Mount is the holiest place for the Jewish people. Our enemies are taking it over. They are breaking the law, destroying archaeology sites, and disgracing Judaism and God. We have to fight. So you can see the water rising, if you will. The tide is rising for the reestablishment of Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount, and effectively this is going to roll into the ask for the rebuilding of the third temple. That's exactly what this is leading towards. And so you can see these 3 items. The imminent return of the red heifer, the ashes, they're going to have that. The temple silver for offerings, the holy silver half shekel, and that is in place so that the Jews can start providing the offering at the third temple. And all we need now, quite literally, all we need now is a third temple in place so that Jews can implement and start using all these things, the red heifer ashes, the holy half shekel, the temple institutes, implements, wash basin, the menorah, all the things, etc., and so that the priests and the priestly class, the Levites, the Kohanim, can start using what they've been learning in their training and start offering temple sacrifices in the third temple. All of this prophesied effectively in Daniel, because it states that the Antichrist will cause the sacrifices to cease, which means they had to have been started again in the third temple, and he's going to sit on the throne in the third temple. And so you step back and say, so if these are the case, his sacrifices are going to stop, and he's going to cause the abomination of desolation on the throne in the third temple. That means the third temple must have been rebuilt, and that means sacrifices must have been started again, which I believe is going to be really the carrot on the stick, which kicks off the 7-year tribulation, which convinces Israel, the Jews, the Israeli public, to go ahead with the peace plan, even though they just like a lot of it. If they can implement their third temple and reestablish temple sacrifices and worship, that's going to convince them to go ahead and along with whatever the peace plan that is in force at that time has. So I think we're very close. I think all these things are converging. I think the peace plan is going to be very interesting over the next several months after April. I expect this peace plan to start rolling out fairly quickly, the details of it, and probably some referendum in Israel, for example. And I think someone's going to come out and say, look, if you go ahead with this, we'll let you guys start worshiping and praying on the Temple Mount. And I think the Jews are going to jump at that. The folks who, the activists who are pushing for it, they're going to continue to raise awareness. The Temple Institute is going to continue to raise awareness. And we'll have that rebuilding of the third temple maybe quickly. I think once the stuff starts going down, it's likely all going to happen in very quick succession, from the rebuilding of the third temple to the prophesied wars, Ezekiel 38 and 39. We don't exactly know when exactly or how these prophecies are going to roll out, but I think when they do start rolling out, I think there's going to be a quick succession. We're not going to be waiting tens of years or even years between each of these prophetic events. These are going to start rolling out very quickly. So I'll leave it there for today, guys. Interesting set of events. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you guys in the next video.